Oh, they just gave consent. I like that. That was really exciting. All right. Well, welcome, official welcome. Hello, everybody. This is Angela Gunder tuning in from Tucson, Arizona, and I have the illustrious privilege to be the host of our very first OLC Live Town Hall for OLC Accelerate 2019. And I've tagged along with the OLC Live initiative since its formation in 2017, which has had the goal of connecting all of our various audiences, both face-to-face and virtual, around the OLC community, particularly tied to the conferences that are occurring. So this is our gear up for the OLC Accelerate conference in November. And for the first one, because we are all participating in the hashtag We Are OLC initiative and celebrating the 25th anniversary of the organization, we decided to talk to some folks who have long embodied the vision, the mission, the goals of the organization. And we have members of the OLC board with us here today, which I'm so excited for. And we're going to do a little bit of storytelling, one of my favorite practices for connecting us and for finding our ubiquitous challenges and opportunities, but also maybe getting some secrets that we didn't know before. In addition to that, we have a couple of exciting pieces that we have as part of the OLC Live initiative. One is that we are embarking on a digital storytelling project to take these conversations that we're having, find themes that, that surface across the different conversations that we'll have. So 4 different town halls, plus all of the programming for OLC Live that will occur during the conference in November. We're going to take all of that information and create some digital visualizations and some different really nice storytelling pieces. So just know that if you are participating in this one, or if you're watching this one back, or somebody told you a secret of like, hey, share this particular story, that it's all going to this artifact that'll be created and shared across the community once we're all done. And at the end of this session, which is jam-packed with a lot of folks sharing information, I'll be sure to bubble up the upcoming dates for things that are happening so you can participate in those that are going to be on the calendar coming up pretty quickly. October, I guess, is our next thing, but we're fast and furious about putting all this together. So without any further ado, I would love to have our featured speakers share a little bit about themselves. This first town hall, again, is really focused on looking back in our pasts, and particularly our pasts as part of the OLC community, and also the future of the organization and the future of the work that we're doing, and that we're connected around digital learning spaces and around online learning. So I am going to have each speaker introduce themselves so that we can keep this lean and mean for our first one, and then answer the question of how did they first get involved with the OLC. And I would love to have Frank kick us off because he can actually start us with a little bit of history of the organization.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Clark and Jennifer and the OLC team that has helped bring us to where we are. I'll just make a couple of short remarks so that I don't use up too much time on way back stuff. But I just want to start by saying that the most important thing I think we at the Swan Foundation did was to provide grants to universities to get things underway, so to speak. So these we call projects. Started with a couple of courses, moved on to degrees, and here we are years later where we are. But the second most important thing I think we did was to attempt to create a community that could share scholarship and practices and move the field faster than if we were just a bunch of isolated practitioners at different places. And the genesis of OLC comes from, and that's sort of my involvement from the very beginning, was how do we get a community started? And one of the first things we did was we had a tiny little meeting in 1994 at the Omni Hotel in New York, which was only by invitation, had about 10 of our grantees. And I remember we had speakers from Drexel and NJIT, SUNY, Rio Salado, Illinois. And just to sort of start by talking about here's what we're starting to do in online learning. That was the beginning. The next year, 1995, we had an open conference at Philadelphia that was organized by Drexel. And I'll never forget at lunchtime, we had one of the early sort of pioneers in thinking about online learning at our table. And I remember she made the remark, I don't know what we're doing here. All this has been done already. And, you know, in some ways she was right. A lot of thinking had been done. A few students had been enrolled here and there. But her view of what had been done was that was it, that we'd shown that it was possible. But no, the real job was to build it up to something that could serve a much larger number of people. And so we stayed with it in spite of that, that little dig about everything's been done. And we never forgot that our purpose was, and it's kind of a three-part statement that we carried around with us, which was that our community is going to be about quality online learning with scale and breadth. And it was the scale that had been missing and the breadth that was missing. Sure, a few people can learn, but all communities ought to participate. It should be an option available to everyone and to every kind of institution, community colleges, comprehensive schools, major universities, graduate schools. It ought to be what people need. And so the idea of quality with scale and breadth is something we've stayed with. We started off with that idea, and you know, through all the participation we've had, and Kay has been one of the sort of key persons in helping us keep our eye on the quality side. We've had many great examples of scale. There's some major institutions that are terribly visible and effective in reaching out to a breadth of communities. And that's what we wanted. We're not there yet. We're a long ways from where we want to be. We'd like to have every course in the world online sometime and have it available to everyone, anyone. And we're not there, but we're getting closer. And it's because of all the work so many people have put into it. So that's all I'm going to say right now. I just wanted to say it started with this modest 25 people or so in the room at the Omni in 1994, went on to become an open conference. And we then did a few other things along the way. We started a summer session to some of our most experienced and our best practitioners were invited. Sloan paid the full bill, and we would have a summer session for, for the next 10 years at least, where we would get together and talk about the newest things going on in online learning. It was kind of a core group that helped, at that time, Sloan C get sort of known. And the word Sloan C began to be used, subsequently eventually changed to OLC when we got beyond the Sloan grad stage. So that's a little bit of history. One final point I want to make, which was that in my mind, one of the real highlights of Sloan C, OLC/OLC was the response to the thousands of students who were affected by Hurricane Katrina and could not continue their schooling. The OLC members got together and created an online university within 1 week of conceptualizing such an idea. We had 150 courses available to students to take. They were provided free of charge by the universities with a subsidy from Sloan to help out. We got in the end about 2,000 students who had been displaced from their campuses who took classes via this thing that was known as Sloan Semester, our little online university, which lasted a year. It did what it was supposed to. It showed the kind of collegiality and spirit of the kind of can-do spirit that the OLC team had. And I just look back on it with great satisfaction. So that's my comment.
Frank, you also answered my next question, which is what was one of your favorite OLC experiences? And I think by proxy with that
Yeah.
story about Hurricane Katrina. And I remember that too, just everybody banding together to make that happen and for it to happen so quickly was amazing. You had a ton of sound bites in there. I'm sure that Matt is tweeting like crazy right now, but one of the things that I really wanted folks to hold on to is just this notion that communities are living things, they're thriving, and it takes effort from everybody, but it also takes consistent assessment of where we're at and where we're going. And I think that certainly in the examples that you shared and the folks that are here that are going to share their stories too, you'll see that that's been consistent throughout the life of the organization. So I thank you for that. Karen, you're up next.
You want me to introduce myself, right?
Yes.
I'm Karen Swan. I'm at the University of Illinois Springfield. I'm a professor. And I didn't get involved in OLC till 1997. That's kind of late compared to Frank. I think he didn't say something that he should. Well, he's very modest. But he and Ralph really made a difference in online learning in this country because they cared about quality and they cared about access. And we could have gone the way of a lot of other cultures of online learning that followed from distance education. And in this country, online learning is not like distance education. It's really quite different. And as we look at MOOCs and some other things that are happening, you can see it could easily have happened that way. And because Sloan was funding things where you would put things online that would have the same quality as things that were offline, it made a gigantic difference. I got involved in 1997 through SUNY Learning Network. And Eric Fredrickson, who came to my university and said, do you want to put a program online? Back when we were using Lotus Notes, to answer another one of your questions.
Shout out to Lotus Notes.
Yeah,
Did not think I would be saying
Lotus Notes. We had people who, at SUNY Learning Network, we had some really clever people who made it work really well, but I still like Lotus Notes better than I like Blackboard. So there you go, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Michael next.
All right. Thank you for having me. Thank you for convening this with my colleagues. My name is Michael Torrence, and I serve as the 7th seated president of Motlow State Community College in Lynchburg, Tennessee. Most people recognize Lynchburg as home of Jack Daniels, so that's the association we can start off with. But in terms of being spirited, I would say that my first involvement with OLC was through my mentor, Dr. Robbie Kendall Melton, and I had the opportunity to connect with Karen and Kay and Frank and all of the brain trust that helped get this baseline started as an important component to the development of online learning and distributive justice, because I do see the work that was created back in the 90s as distributed. The learning component and in the consortia have continued to grow to upwards over 600, 700, 800 members in total membership. And I would just like to say that I'm one of the newbies. So I was reading about all of the great work that was occurring through my colleague like Anthony Picano, who we lovingly call Tony. So I was reading that work as a grad student and following that work in hopes of one day maybe I'll be able to put my fingerprints on this as well. In the last several years, I've had the good fortune of being connected and serving as a board member. In those last couple of years, I'd like to say that just because someone started something doesn't mean that they're not dynamic enough in thought to see the future. And that's what excites me about OLC in my partnership as a member, but most importantly as a learner amongst these smart and sharp people. I'm thankful that they are open to the idea and the ideology of online and emerging technologies and what that means for the future of delivering this modality via AR, VR, XR, and some of the things that we don't even know about yet, because as technology continues to emerge and change, and we are engaging with the first set of digital natives that were in their parents' bellies, they are now freshmen at our institutions. So not only do we have to plan, but we are prepared. And I think OLC has a lot to do with that. And I guess I need to rephrase that. OLC is one of the reasons why we understand and have prepared, not just with information and narrative, but with research and best practices with the work of Kay, for example, and showing what standards are important and why they're important to develop something that is long lasting and legacy, because I think that's the important part of this. Ralph, who is not on, I see, but his thought process and the support of the Sloan Foundation has created legacy. This, I hope, will outlast all of us. And it's not just good work, it's great work.
Powerful words as usual, and I just love that both you and Karen referenced within your origin stories people, the folks that brought you in. Eric Fredrickson, who is so sad to not be able to be on this call today, the president of the board. It's the start of classes. I actually applaud all of you for being here, because it's the start of classes for so many, and you still made your time out. But him bringing you in, Karen, the illustrious Rabbi Milton bringing you in, Michael. She's one of my personal superheroes for forever and ever and ever. Godmother of anything that she wants to be within my family. But I also have to give a shout out to Jane Moore, who is my origin story, and she's the reason that I'm here within the OLC, and she's on the call too. So anytime I get to applaud her, I always have to do it. And you gave that great shout out to Kay, even though I saw you just unmuted. Did you have something else you were going to say, Michael?
I do. And I've been talking a lot about the importance of recognizing and respecting the past, not simply to make people feel good, but because you understand the importance of paying homage, not in the sense of worship, but in the sense of we wouldn't be here without you. So my hat's off to my colleagues, and I'm humbled all the time when I get to listen, especially when Frank is teaching me about finances.
Kay, actually, all of your colleagues, I felt, gave a shout out to all of the work that you're doing with quality within the organization and beyond the organization. I am so excited to turn it over to you for an introduction and talk about your origin story with the OLC.
Thank you, Angela. How long do we have? Because I could talk about OLC for hours and hours and hours. So currently, I'm a professor of educational leadership at Lamar University. I teach in a fully online doctoral program where I have students all over the world. We hope that they'll come in to get hooded, but that's not even necessary. And we use a lot of virtual tools to be able to meet with them. But prior to coming here in 2011, when my husband relocated us out from Dallas to outside of Houston, I was the dean of online programs at a private faith-based university, Dallas Baptist University, where in 1998, actually the end of 97, early 98, they said, Kay, we want you to start our online program. And so I've always tried to go to the literature to find anything. I hadn't fallen in love with research yet, but I started seeking and trying to find, well, there's not much here. What am I going to do? And so I started trying to search, and I came across, at the time, Sloan C. And so at the time, early on, this was probably in 2000, before I put a course up, before I had it go live, you could actually upload your course or give the course, I think it was actually Janet Moore, the chief knowledge officer at the time, you gave them access to your course, and then they would go through and do a quality evaluation. And if it were good, if it met those standards, then they would actually link it on their website. And so for me, that was free marketing, but it was also that quality endorsement that I was looking for. And it was free to, assuming it was free to members. And so, I know it was free to us. I don't know if it was free to anybody else, but from the very beginning, I started using the Sloan C as my go-to resource and going to the conferences and trying to connect with people. I had actually by 2004, I think I had won 2 exemplary online course awards. And because of that, Janet Moore had reached out to me and asked me to be one of the first online teaching certificate mentors. So that's part of the OLC program, where you spend 9 weeks in an online class working with a facilitator, and then you're assigned a mentor where you develop course materials and through several months. And so I got to be part of that. And one day she called me about that, and we were chatting about it. And she said, by the way, what are you going to do your dissertation in? Because I was just finishing up my coursework at University of Nebraska. And I said, well, you know what? This is what I want to do. I said, I am so sick and tired of justifying and double justifying that what we're doing online is just as good as what we're doing in the classroom, when I knew for a fact it was better than in some classrooms. And so I want to develop some kind of quality scorecard that everybody can use to have something in common with the standards, because even at that time, the regional accreditors had very little, that was in common. They each kind of had their own thing going. But so I really wanted to do that from a research standpoint. And Janet said, I'll never forget it. She goes, Kay, she like sucked in her breath. She said, Kay, Sloan C is very interested in that, and we want to be a part of that. And so Sloan C was actually the one that helped me get my expert panel together for that very first research study. And it's such a privilege to work with this organization and be able to be a part of this, the quality scorecard and the other scorecards. It really is a great opportunity for me.
That's just so wonderful to hear from you, that journey, because we hear all the time, all of us as colleagues, how impactful that has been to so many of us. And even that struggle that you had of defending the rigor of online, and also just the opportunities that are uniquely available in the modality of online. It's still a struggle that we face day to day. So I just want to amplify that piece that you shared, because I know that there are people that are new to this field that are probably figuring out, like, how do I even, start to carve up that issue? Well, guess what? Folks have been doing this for years and years and years, and there's all sorts of great support all around. I, like Clark said, many noted head nods. We're all going to have neck problems at the end of this webinar, because we're all in consensus. So I think that we have our last featured guest on the call. Patsy, is that you on the phone? And the phone number is muted right now, but we'll give it a second. Oh.
Hey, I am here. Can you hear me?
Oh, great. Welcome, Patsy. And what we're doing is we're just having our featured guests introduce themselves briefly and share how they first got involved with the OLC.
So, boy, I just heard Kay, and I guess you picked people who have a long time history with OLC, because we go back to the Sloan C days. But my name is Patsy Moskal, and I am director of the Digital Learning Impact Evaluation, part of the Research Initiative for Teaching Effectiveness at the University of Central Florida here in Orlando. And UCF has a long history with this conference in particular. In fact, in the very beginning, we actually co-sponsored the conference, and folks from our continuing ed program worked with the Sloan C folks to actually start the program. Once you moved to OLC, then it went fully with the organization, but we've always had a lot to do with it. So I personally, being a researcher, have been involved with the research side for years. Not only have we regularly submitted, it's one of our traditional conferences to attend, and the organization is something that we've been involved with. But I've been a big advocate of trying to promote and encourage and facilitate in any way I can any kind of research that goes on at any of the OLC conferences, or now the new research center, looking at opportunities for graduate research assistants and all of that kind of stuff. So my history goes back to not just being a presenter, but also being a reviewer, proposal reviewer, and a track chair for learning effectiveness and the research tracks. And actually in 2014, being a program chair in 2015 being a conference chair, and now being honored to be part of the board of directors. So it's been a lot of it's been a lot of opportunities, and also being really involved with the online learning journal, which I think I think the online learning consortium is definitely a great resource for those of us who are involved with online learning. And I loved Kay's story, because I think we all had to answer the is it as good as face-to-face at some point in time, and quite frankly are still answering that to a lot of people as though face-to-face is the gold standard, when of course we all know it's not. Good teaching is good teaching, and the modality really is not part of that. You can have outstanding instruction in online learning as well. So, and I think this organization and this conference is a great place to come to find out what's going on in the field and what other people are doing in terms of practice and also in terms of research. So my goal has always been to work with the folks in the organization that are big into research and try to really promote that and make sure we have a good representation from not just practitioners, but also researchers in the field.
So well said. And Patsy, I don't think you can see the chat, but there were so many shout outs to you, particularly your amazing contributions to research. And I will amplify one piece, just this notion that only certain people are allowed to do research. So much of your work has broken down those walls and really brought people in amazing ways to help us move the needle on all of these big questions that we have, all of these challenges that are shared ubiquitously across that field. So kudos to you, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen next, and I'm going to have her answer for us share with us one of her favorite OLC experiences.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I'm going to pick up on research. Patsy said it, and I'll say it again. I've been here forever. I'm older than dirt as far as OLC goes. So I've had many, many experiences, but one of my favorite ones is one of the older ones. We used to, in the summer, have research retreats, about 40 people, maybe, Frank? There wasn't very many. It was small, and people would present their research to each other, and we would have a discussion about it, but we also had meals together and events together. Yeah, it was really nice. My favorite place was Sagamore, which is a resort on Lake George, but we also had them. First one Frank was reminding me was at UIUC, and then we had them at Olin College for a while. We also had one in, is it Vancouver Island or Victoria Island?
It was Vancouver Island.
And Victoria's a college, right?
Yeah. Well, we if I can just say a word. One of the things we wanted to do was to make this a good venue for talking about the field and sharing knowledge, scholarship, and so on. And we didn't think we'd do it well if we just booked a Motel 6 somewhere. We tried to pick kind of comfortable places, put it that way. And the Vancouver one was kind of the most far afield we went, but it was kind of fun too. I think the highlight of those were the ones Suni ran at the Sagamore on Lake George.
Eric, Eric ran.
Eric, right.
Yeah, they were wonderful. I also, the thing that was really nice about it was not only getting to just speak with researchers and find out, at that time you could almost know everything that was happening in online learning. So bringing those people together really made it wonderful. But the most wonderful part was the informal part, where you would meet people on the trails or you go out to dinner together. And the one experience I could really think of is Vancouver Island. We had these buses that took us from the place where we were staying to a restaurant. And I remember the time that Ray Schroeder made the entire bus trip stop because he wanted ice cream. But you could actually do things like that back then. It was wonderful, and I learned so much that way. It just possibly made my career.
I'm going to put in a plug for buses stopping for ice cream as something that never goes away as part of our professional learning network practices that we take part in. I think all of those connections, however we forge them, are so meaningful and impactful. And if anything, the story to tell is how do we share with the folks that might be on the sidelines or feel like they're outliers in this field, how do we let them know that there's room and space for them to join on the bus and go get ice cream too, and potentially change their lives with all of the amazing things that might happen. I'm going to open it up to the rest of the board, and I'm loving all of these pieces in the chat too of memories that y'all are sharing. Keep on sharing memories, keep on answering the questions that I'm sharing. It's not just our featured speakers that we want to hear from, we want to hear from you too. And if you have questions for them as well, I'll try to bubble them up. But if anybody else would like to share of our featured speakers a particular OLC experience that was one of their favorites, I open up the floor to you. And I have to do the teacher exercise of be quiet long enough to give people a chance. Wait time. I'm not doing a good job. I'm talking through it. Okay, well, I do have a question for Frank in particular, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart within the notion of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So how do you support those principles of inclusion in your teaching and learning, and how has this evolved over the past 25 years? And I would challenge the folks in the audience to answer that question too in the chat, and I'll do the same.
Yeah, I think from Angela, from the very beginning, we had this, I think we tried to capture it with our word that we were about quality with scale and breadth. I think it's the breadth idea that has remained kind of foremost in my head over the years. And it, in the beginning, there was some notion that, well, this online stuff may be good for engineers, or it might be good for computer scientists, or it may be good for certain kinds of communities, certain kinds of people, that sort of thing. And I think that simply runs counter to what it's about. We are about democratizing education and making it available to everyone. And that means having everyone that's on the practitioner side, the entire range of people participate. So I guess it's a big challenge for all of us to always think about OLC as the thing that tries to create a community that can maximize interactivity among the biggest community we can possibly put together. And it isn't easy to do, and we practice it as best as we can. We have conferences, we have journals, we have Accelerate, one of our conferences. We have some of the collaborative conferences. We try everything, but I think it's kind of a challenge for the big community, the OLC considered as an entirety, to think of ways that we can be more effective, to be more inclusive, more sharing, and more interactive in sharing what we know and how we can simply get better and reach a larger and larger population. It's kind of a challenge, and it's not easy to grab everyone's opinion and make it into something useful. But I just want to encourage everyone to think about this question, because it's one of the three big, it's one of those three words that we're about. I was delighted to hear all the discussion about quality, because if we're not about quality, we may as well pack it in. We are about quality and online learning from the very beginning. I was at a meeting of the Swan trustees one time, and one of our trustee members, I remember very early, it was about 1993, spoke up. He was a Nobel Prize winner from a major university. And he said, "But Frank, how do we know this stuff's any good?" And my answer at that time, and it's always stayed the same, is that we ask every university that we fund to ensure that the courses being offered online are at least as good as the courses that they offer in their classroom. Now, if you can make them better, great. That's terrific. But it's that kind of thing, the quality with scale and breadth. Scale cannot occur if we don't practice inclusivity. Breadth is a meaningless word if we don't include everyone. So I just think I've tried. I haven't been terribly successful in this, but we tried to do special projects for people with disabilities in some way, blind, hearing affected, and so forth. I don't think we particularly featured them, and we haven't been hugely successful, but still those communities are participating in online learning. So anyway, it's a challenge for everyone, not for any one person.
Again, this is such a great conversation in terms of the depth that we're getting into in such a short amount of time, and things that I think that we all struggle with at our own institutions. Both Michael Torrence and Karen also chimed in on this question, so I just wanted to give just a little bit more time for you to elaborate on your responses. So Karen, if you could share a bit more about your thoughts on that.
Sure. I don't know if anybody read the chat, but what I was saying, there's technical ways to be inclusive, and then there's, I guess I would call it social ways to be inclusive, that you celebrate and appreciate everybody in your classes. I have a meet your classmates discussion, which is the first one in the course, that's worth no points, but it's probably the most used discussion I have. And in it, I encourage everybody to introduce themselves, and then I respond to them and try to respond to them in a way that celebrates their uniqueness. And I think that just sets the tone for what I'm doing in class. I don't much participate in discussions after that, because I've learned that my participation shuts the discussion right down. But I do have a journal where I do the same thing one-on-one with students, and I think it's the way that we the way that we are welcoming in our classes is really, really important. And I guess the second part is the material that we use. That we use material that is not just old white men. That it includes all sorts of people and opinions. And to me, that's the most exciting part about online learning and online discussion, that it opens everybody up to the different perspectives everyone has on all kinds of topics.
Yeah, I think that the work that's happening in a lot of other fields that are sort of close to ours around, well, many things. So pluralities of literacies, and that notion that everybody comes to learning in different ways, and we need to acknowledge that in the classroom. Culturally sustaining pedagogy, all of the elements of culture. There's room to dig into all of that in our work, regardless of our role or our position. And it's not something that should be an afterthought. It needs to be embedded into all of our work.
Yeah.
Amazing. Michael Torrence, I wanted to turn it over to you to add a little bit more there as well. And then Patsy, I will cue you up next if you have something to add to that too, because I think I saw you unmute.
Yeah, absolutely. When we think of online learning as a space in which equity is the norm, it's one of the unique spaces where learning takes place. It affords for faceless interaction based on acumen, ability, and understanding. And sometimes misunderstanding and misrepresentation, which is also good because that's where we get the diversity of thought, where serious conversations about best practices, and I'll reiterate quality, as well as where someone's lens directs them, and then where's the opportunity to be informed by someone else's experiences that impacts the new lens that you always leave a class with. As all of us know, learners walk into a learning space online one way, and I would venture to say that a large majority of them leave that space with a different perspective and a healthy respect, if not comprehension, but at least a healthy respect for how someone else views the material and how that impacts the world that we live in.
Amazing. Patsy, did you have anything to add to this? Oh, I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Oh,
Thank you.
wonderful. Just turn it off, turn it back on, mute and unmute, and it works again. I think one of the big advantages for online learning, and I know that UCF has definitely used this, is the advantage that it brings to the student that might not have an opportunity to engage with higher education otherwise. And we've seen that time and time again, and we're experiencing now there are quite a lot of our students that are because of family responsibilities, the need to have to work to be able to afford a program. They really need the flexibility that online and blended learning provides to be able to even engage with our institution. So we've really tried to use that and leverage it as a way to increase access for our students. And I think that's really a perk, and I think it's just part of our responsibility as educators and particularly online learning educators. And I think this is a real advantage of the Online Learning Consortium, is to figure out how to do that with the highest quality. So there are a lot of really great technologies and instructional technologies that we use. And from my standpoint as a researcher, I work with so many faculty who find a way to use technology to meet their pedagogical goals. And I think that online learning has really helped in that space, particularly for the students who can't get the education otherwise.
Our access mission is first and foremost, and that was completely well said. I think anytime that we migrate too far away from that, then we're losing our way, and we always have to keep that as our focus. We talked a lot about people in the beginning. We had some good shout outs, I think, on the chat and also in the conversation. And my next question, I'll start out with Kay, and then I'll ask you this next, Patsy. Who composes your OLC community, particularly the people that you've met along the way that you always enjoy seeing, connecting, and collaborating with? And if you have a particular story that you want to share about that relationship, that would be great. So we'll start with Kay. And I'll put the question in the chat for others. Oh, sorry, Kay.
No, that's fine. I'm actually a fairly new board member, but I'm sitting here listening to Michael and Karen and Frank talk and thinking what a privilege this is to be able to just sit beside them and hear these stories and hear their thoughts. For me, I mentioned it early on, Dr. Janet Moore was the Chief Knowledge Officer for OLC for a long time for Sloan C. And so she really kind of took me in and introduced me after we decided we were, I was going to move forward on the scorecard. I remember we were in Florida. I think we were maybe at the Caribe Royale, and she drugged me around to everybody in the conference that she could, saying, we're going to do an online scorecard. We're going to have a scorecard for quality. This is the person that's going to do it. And she really, really took me under her wings. But from that, I've gotten to meet so many incredible people and gotten to work with so many great institutions and helping them deploy it. But I have to tell one little story. We have a member, his name is Dr. Armando Villarreal, and he used to be with Penn State, and then he became the head of CREAD and also works with another organization, CALED. And these are two groups that are very focused on distance learning in Latin America. And he is so passionate about his people, about the people there, and that they needed this scorecard, they needed this opportunity, that it had to be translated and it had to be deployed. And from that relationship, I've been able to really get to know so many organizations outside the US and see the desire for quality, just like we have here in the US, that same desire is there for quality. And you talk about learning about diversity and how to better address it. It really helps when if you've lived in one state your whole life, and then all of a sudden you start traveling internationally. That will absolutely open your eyes to a better understanding of how we need to treat people and how we need to respect other cultures.
Patsy, I turn it over to you now. And I can repeat the question too if you'd like me to. Oh, muted again. Should do your mute and unmute trick.
Hopefully I'm back now. Am I back now?
Yes, you're back.
Okay.
It's like we're waiting and with bated breath for your
yeah,
enlightenment.
that's the suspense. I'm not usually a suspenseful person, so that's new to me. But yes, so oh, wow. For me, Online Learning Consortium and this conference in particular, it's all about the relationships. So it's the collaboration and the people that you see every year. I mean, there have been some of us, Tony Picciano and Karen Swan and Peter Shea and Eric Frederickson and all of those people who've been involved for years and years and years and have served in various roles within the organization, honestly. I think we all have a sense of obligation. I mean, we feel like we really want to see OLC succeed, and we believe in the mission. We believe in online learning and promoting that. So it's always so much fun and so, quite frankly, rewarding to be around people who are in the same space but have different experiences and have different, different stories to tell. So I always am humbled by how much I learned from everyone there. And it's been an ongoing thing. And I think Kay mentioned being a new person. I mean, and, that's, having been with it for years, we just kind of keep picking up people. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, right? It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So our network keeps getting bigger. And even, Clark and Angela, I mean, 20 years ago, I don't think you guys were involved with this organization, right? But now it's like you're part of the fabric as well. So it's been really cool to see that and to meet a lot of new people and to learn from other people. I think we don't get outside of our own little sphere often enough. I joke that on campus, faculty rarely get outside their own office and meet people who might be doing cool stuff in different departments or in different buildings. And I think the same thing is true. We need these opportunities to meet other people who have different perspectives and have learned different learning experiences and different students, different student populations. So I think it really enriches our own world and on our campuses and our institutions.
That's amazing. When you were talking before about your pathway to leadership within the organization, I know Clark and I were definitely tallying in our heads like, yep, did that, did that. And so many of our colleagues, they ask how to get involved, and it's really just leaning in and asking somebody, where can I help? Because there's so much room to help. It was not a plan. It was completely accidental and just a desire to keep on connecting with the community, and there was always room to do that. I also want to set the record straight that neither Clark nor I were toddlers 20 years ago. We have a very good skincare regimen, and we are much older than we look. So we've probably had about the same amount of time in the organization. I think Clark actually maybe 2 years on me. But it's been about 5 years for me, and both of us have been conference chairs already, and that's been one of the most rewarding experiences that we've ever had, professionally and personally. I'm speaking for you, Clark, as if you couldn't also share your perspective. But
I've just been sitting over here on mute for a long time, enjoying this conversation, and really, I was so excited to hear from Frank and Karen and Michael and Kay and Patsy about all of this history, because I came into the organization about 2008 for the first time, attended the conference, and the following year I presented, and then eventually just kind of ramped up from there and helping review, peer review the session proposals and be a track chair, and eventually, as Angela mentioned, being a co-conference chair. And it's been really exciting to be able to sort of be involved on all those different levels, but also to hear about that history going back to 1994, when actually I was teaching over TV at that point and just getting started in that. As you mentioned earlier, both of you, I think the whole TV teaching distance learning that was going on back then. And I was excited just to get on the internet. I was like, wow, I can there's like this World Wide Web thing that was just brand new. It was fantastic. And then I started teaching online in 1999, which was 20 years ago. So, but then I did that for a long time before I actually went into more administration and became familiar with this organization. So what a pleasure to be able to hear all of these stories.
And if any of you are good at Google searches, you can find some of those videos of Clark teaching distance education German available on the interwebs. They're truly fantastic. That's your bonus prize for watching this webinar. So we have time for, I think, one last question. I was debating making this hard on y'all, but you've been so great, I won't make it too tricky. The question is 25 years then and now. What kinds of technology were you using 25 years ago, and what technology do you engage with now? I was going to make it more complicated and then say, what tools are you using both then and now? Like, what has persisted in time? But instead of that, I'll leave that up to you, how you would like to answer it. And if you want to change technology and replace that word with practices, that is also acceptable. So we'll start with Frank. Give us a little bit of a history, and then also a current story of what is your then and now in terms of 25 years within this field. And make sure you unmute. Yep.
Yeah, that's a really great topic, and I think we could all sit and talk about that for all afternoon. The truth is that the technology, when I got into this stuff in 1992, 93, 94, I mean, it was truly pathetic. We had the 10-pound portable PC and 9.6 baud modems, and you name it, we had a handicap. Albeit, I know Lotus Notes was a good product, was a robust product that did work well. Still, we kept, there's just no comparison. One of the things that Ralph and I had from the very beginning was infinite confidence that technology would fall in our laps as the years went by, and better tools would be available. And sure enough, we ended up from where we started, which now feels like the Middle Ages, to where we are today with really spiffy stuff across the board. I think technology looking ahead, my opinion is that it will favor increasing varieties of blending, synchronous, asynchronous, mixed, bandwidth. Bandwidth will practically become free if we really begin to use the true potential of optical fiber and wireless. So I think variations on the blending theme are something we really have to look at. Online will always be with us. Fully online, count on it. It's going to be important. But variations of that with blending are just, I think, really a very important thing, and it will overwhelm all of academia. All of academia is going to be blended, believe me. I don't think you'll find a program, a certification degree, where there is no online or some kind of electronic interaction. It's simply going to permeate the system. So we might as well recognize that and get ready for it, because it's coming our way. And it's halfway there. I mean, even today, I'm sure Karen and Kay and other practitioners, Picciano is another one who could often comment on these things. I think what you're seeing is that variations of blended are with us, and they're here to stay. And everything that we hope for will keep getting better. I'll tell you at the very beginning, it could have been a handicap. I was told many times, Frank, let us just study this stuff. It's all very interesting. Let's wait for the technology to get better. And we said, no, we'll give you the money only if you do something, not if you think. So we weren't discouraging thinking, but we were really encouraging the doing.
That's so well said. We're running short on time, and I want to make sure that I can share information on the other events that are happening. So I'll turn it over to Kay, Karen, Patsy, and Michael. If you have any last thoughts on this notion of tech and practices that we were using 25 years ago and where we're heading now, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to ask Frank if he remembers replicating. We didn't have to worry about the modem because we had this thing called replicating with Lotus Notes where it made another copy of it. My children thought it was hysterical when I would say, oh, I have to replicate now.
That term means very different things now.
Well, 25 years ago, I had the good distinction and opportunity to be in the U.S. Air Force. I think it was 1994. So I wasn't a freshman until 1996. And I remember learning to 10 key and input all of everyone's leave because I was the base leave monitor in Elmendorf, Alaska. So imagine moving from 10 keying and looking at very slow uploads, and you turn on your computer, you go get a cup of coffee, and you come back and you're still waiting for your computer to come on in some instances to today. So 25 years from now in terms of practices, I don't know that I am better than I was 25 years ago. I just know that the technology has moved at such a rapid pace that it forces us to reinvent and relearn how we can apply what it can do for the end user. That is, the people that have come to OLC to learn, relearn, and reimagine what's possible when they take the good information that's shared during all those great sessions back to their home campuses and make a difference in people's lives.
Beautiful. Well said. I want to amplify too something that Kay dropped in the chat. In 1998, she had an instructor tell her that he thought the internet was an academic exercise that would go away. So in 2015, we had a department head say, okay, so when online goes away, online education goes away, what are we going to do with all of these faculty lines? Are they just going to go back to face-to-face teaching? And I guess the short answer is, yeah, sure. When it goes away, I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting to see that happen. So it's amazing. The challenges remain the same in many ways, but we continue to evolve, and it's these communities, these conversations that really help us to actually make the needed impactful change. So I am so thankful to everybody on this call, particularly to our fine friends from the board. Anytime we get to connect with you and hear about our history and our future, it's so important to us. And if you're watching this back, if you're tuning in later, then just know that there are many avenues within which you can tell your OLC story, particularly the We Are OLC initiative. So we'll have links available that you can get to. We have a full schedule of our events that are coming up. There's a tiny URL that I think Clark shared, and we're going to put the links in the chat. But the next event that we're having, he's copying and pasting right now. Our next event is the September Town Hall with Kelvin Thompson from UCF, where Patsy also joins us. And he's been just an amazing leader within the entire OLC community, as well as being one of the first hosts of OLC Live. So we're going to be doing a David Letterman style roundup of big things that you can get from the conference. And then we have a town hall in October that will be with our track chairs and our best in track winners. I'm like, oh, let me see how well I can do this. And then our last one will be right before the conference in November with last minute things that you can get from that. The RSVP form that many of you filled out to come to this also has links to all of the events that will be happening at the conference, including an online international summit on November the 19th. That is an all-day thing. We are hitting 6 continents, although maybe it's 7 continents. It's kind of crazy. We have people that have said they want to represent Antarctica that are in Antarctica. So we're waiting with bated breath, and that's going to be really impressive. It's going to be crowdsourcing definitions of openness region by region, and we're going to do that from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. into these different slots. So it'll be really exciting. Again, free and completely open to everybody to join in on that. And then throughout the OLC Accelerate Conference on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so I guess that's the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And if I forget any of those dates or I mess them up, somebody can correct them for me. We'll have interviews and special sessions that we're going to be holding. Clark and I will be tuning in from the future 2525 and interviewing illustrious guests, as well as having a lot of different games and design battles that we're going to play all on Zoom. So it's a great lineup. We're just honored to be able to do this, and just so delighted to have this group here today to kick us off. Could not have a finer set of folks for our very first town hall. So as I do always, heart hands to all of you. And with that, we're tuning out. Take care, everybody. Oh, I love the semi-silent applause. That was great. Thanks all.